Hello, everybody. If you have anything on the agenda, please, if you have any topic, please add it to the agenda. But with that, I'm going to pass the mic for John to discuss the first topic, surface entry. Let me start screen sharing.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Wasn't earlier.
Who's here today? All right. Yeah, so this is a complex issue. I don't know that, well, it's pretty tricky, but I'll try and explain it and hopefully it makes sense. So what happened was in service entry, we have a address field. This is the service VIP, basically, not the endpoints, but the service VIP. So this often translates to a listener IP. It's TCP traffic. So previously, what we were doing was we were internally in Istio, we had this model.service object. That's kind of the generic service representation. So we were splitting the service entries. So you'd have one model.service per IP. This is kind of problematic because in some scenarios, we treat this differently and others we don't. In some cases, we would actually filter out to only get distinct host names of services. So if you ended up putting two IPs, one of them would get filtered out because it was seen as a duplicate, even though it really shouldn't have been. And so what we did, and there was also some issues with dual stack. Like if you put a IPv4 and IPv6 address in there, like you probably want to treat those as one logical thing and not as two completely different services. So the initial fix was to do just that, was to basically just make one service with multiple IPs. We recently added dual stack support into a lot of the places in Istio, including the model.service. So this was made possible by that. We did that, we backported it, and it caused two different regressions. One was that if you had a partial conflict with one of the IP addresses in the list, before, because they were totally distinct, we would just drop that listener. Or in some cases, when we have conflicts, we can merge them. Depends on the two different protocols that were in conflict with each other. But now, since we treat it as one big blob, if there was a conflict, we would just drop all of them. So you would actually lose all the addresses instead of just one. The other issue, which was just like strictly a dumb bug. I mean, I don't mean that. I mean, it's less complicated. Was that if there was a CIDR in the list instead of an IP address, we try to put that in a field in Envoy that doesn't actually support CIDR, it only supports IP addresses. So in 1.22, because it was in a patch release that we did this and a pretty major breaking change, we just reverted it. But we need to decide what we want to do for 1.23 and master moving forward. So that's kind of the backstory. I can talk about some proposed solutions perhaps, but I want to pause because that was a lot. Yep, what's up?
Yes, briefly, what's the use case for having a CIDR range associated with a host name and service entry?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it's effectively like a match on a CIDR range to go somewhere. I don't really know when you would use it, to be honest. Obviously, at least one person is, because they reported the bug. I think there was a decent number of thumbs up as well on it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But yeah, I really don't. I can think of theoretical use cases. I don't know any practical ones, and that's probably just because I haven't had a weird environment that makes sense.
Fair. I'm just trying to wrap my head around sort of what people are trying to accomplish, and service entry is one of the most useful Istio resources, but also one of the ones I see a lot of bugs come through with exactly this sort of thing. In fact, there have been several variations of this bug in particular. So just trying to figure out what the most correct thing is, and if it's even feasible to get there.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. If there's no more questions at this point, I'll keep going. So I kind of had two different ideas of fixes. There's probably more, so I'd be open to ideas. One was I was trying to find out, okay, like we take this service entry, we make it this big service with multiple IPs. Like, can we somehow split it up in the listener generation and then figure out where there's conflicts, and then anywhere where there's not conflicts, like merge it back together. And then that way we still deal with all the conflicts, we still deal with the CIDR thing, and we just have to mark those as like not mergeable. And as I was doing this, it was insanely complicated, like really, really, really complicated. I had no faith that I was doing the right thing, even if I wrote a bunch of tests. But also it got me thinking, like, what is really the point of doing the merging after all this? Like, it made me really think maybe the original fix to do the merging actually was maybe the wrong idea, and we should actually just be always splitting them up. And the real root cause was that we were filtering out some of these so that we lost the endpoints. For a while, I've been working on this other fix, which I thought was unrelated to this, but turns out to be a potential solution. So if we had the sidecar scoping resource, and there's this interesting thing that a sidecar that imports everything does not behave. This is I probably linked the wrong PR here. Well, technically, this is a PR that's doing the change I'm talking about and reverting the other change, but I have the one that's just independent. That's a description and everything. Anyhow, so when you import everything in a sidecar, I would logically expect that it behaves the same as having no sidecar, because that's the default, is that you import everything. But it's actually not. You go down this entirely different code path when we generate the internal representation in Istio WG. So in particular, what this does differently is that in the non-sidecar case, we only allow a single host name to exist, like one service per host name. But in the sidecar case, we allow multiple services per host name, but only if they're in the same namespace. And so what ends up happening is once we split them, then they're all still there and it all still works as normal. This is a pretty massive change. Like, it's a really risky change because it's in kind of all this core logic, and we've had so many bugs around all these wonky emergent cases. But it does seem like it's the right path to go down, that we have this unified logic for everything. Like, it's really silly that you get pretty big changes when you apply a sidecar that's supposed to do nothing, for example. So I was thinking maybe as a fix to this, we revert the change to merge into the model.service and then also merge the sidecar fix. And then it seems maybe the best of both worlds. And go ahead, Keith.
Can you clarify if when you're using are you referring to a model.service or a Kubernetes service resource in the same namespace?
Everything I'm talking about is model.service, which could be derived from a service entry or from a Kubernetes service. There's also some logic, though, when you're talking about Kubernetes services. I have to double check the exact logic, but I believe it is that if there is a Kubernetes service that's conflicting with a service entry, we use the Kubernetes service because it's more kind of scoped name. That way, someone can't just hijack the, cluster.local service name with some bogus. In the PR that talks about merging them, it goes into depth there. I might be slightly off on the semantics.
Okay, so essentially the change that you think is possible, if I had to restate it from my own understanding, is to basically make the sidecar scoping resources logic be for the global logic. We allow multiple services, multiple model.services to be joined to the same host name if those model.services are all in the same namespace.
No, so well, it's not really that the model.services are joined. So inside of the side, so all this model.services get compiled down into a sidecar scope object, which may be somewhat confusingly, but this happens whether or not you have a sidecar. Inside of that, there's a list of services. And so in that list, with a sidecar resource, we would have multiple entries that happen to have the same service or host name. But without the sidecar, we would have filtered them out. So there's only one.
Okay. So I recall briefly some of this logic. Okay, so for my sake, can you reiterate the benefits of having lists with the same host name, lists of services with the same host name, whereas before we filtered them out?
Yeah, so we would get, let's say let me just write out an example. So today, with the change that fixes some things but causes the other issues around conflicts, that's what we have. What I'm proposing is we would have this basically, and this is also this is also exactly what it looked like if you had a sidecar resource. So this problem never actually, like, there was no issues before you got a sidecar resource. It was only if you didn't have one.
So the today is the one with the revert. Is that right?
No, that's with the change that was reverted.
Okay.
So, like before it was reverted, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got it.
So how does the proposed architecture affect dual stack?
That's the thing, is I feel like it still works, but maybe I'm just misunderstanding. That was part of why I wanted to come here and discuss this, was I didn't fully grok why, like, you know, how it, you know, why we needed this in the first place.
I would have to go back and look through the PRs, but I think one of the big changes for dual stack that I think Steve Zhang was working on and then Leo Sara were working on for dual stack is that now services have multiple addresses. And I think the reason for that is so that the algorithms for dual stack proxies and Envoy can use happy eyeballs. So I think it's like the primary address with the list of additional addresses. You have to key off an original primary address, or at least that's when I.
Yeah, but this is for listeners though. I think that's only for endpoints.
Oh, you're right. Happy eyeballs is only for endpoints. What about? I mean, they still do they do happy eyeballs on listener. No, he's not initiating. Maybe it's for servers being talked with happy eyeballs. I'm rambling at this point. I'll have to go double check and see, but I remember there's something with additional addresses in Envoy.
No, there is additional addresses, but I think it might just be as like optimization so that you don't have to copy the listener, which is something we lose. Like now we won't merge listeners, but.
Right, that's my follow-up question. How much is because at that point with dual stack especially, you're duplicating your listener to increasing the config size, right?
Yeah, that was probably the motivation actually, because
did we publish a blog around that? I remember how we optimize like a dual stack Envoy resources. Let me see if I can find it.
Yeah, we might have, but just because we published a blog on an internal detail doesn't mean we can't change it, right?
Well, no. I'm just saying we don't want to lose that optimization. Not saying we can't change it. I just want to make sure we still.
But I definitely think that correctness of single stack is the more important than optimization of dual stack, and correctness of dual stack is in the middle, right?
That I agree, because probably 5-10% using dual stack, right?
That's about pretty high. I'd probably shift the decimal place a little, yeah.
Okay.
But over time it will probably grow. But yeah, oh yeah, they did. Thanks, I didn't actually know about this.
Yeah, v6. Yeah, Ben's right. A single stack does include IPv6 only. Yes, as far as use cases, I think you still. Oh yeah, there are Kubernetes cases that are fully v6, so yeah. That's a good call out.
Well, if we want optimization back, we can go to the listener filter tree matching thing that we were talking about yesterday, Keith. And we could just build one listener. And it solves all of our problems, but it's probably
That's
far too
how
broad
is
of
it
a
related?
fix. Well, if we have one big listener, then we decouple the matching from, like, we don't need additional addresses because there's no address. We just have a tree that is doing matching of IPs, right? So we can easily say,
Oh, okay.
matches
So
listed
I missed
IPs.
that context. Okay.
That's not why I opened it. I opened it for ambient, where we use it. But if we want to, so there's been this long-standing issue in Istio of moving away from having multiple listeners to one listener for outbound. We've done inbound forever. Well, not forever, actually, but since like 1.5 maybe, but not for outbound. And the reason we can't move to outbound is, one, there was fear of broader impact of filter drains. I'm pretty sure that that's resolved now because now filter chains drain individually from the listener. But the big thing was around the listener filters, where there was no way that we could conditionally enable things like the HTTP inspector and the TLS inspector, which we need to conditionally enable for server-first protocols. So if we fix those, then we could transition to a model where we just have one giant listener with a giant listener tree, which is all
Interesting. Okay.
ambient works in the waypoints.
Yeah, LSM did that for our functionality back in the day. In the tree, the tree stuff would address some of the issues we had there. So I think I'm with you now. Like, as long as there is some path about completely closing the door to optimizing dual stack in the future, then I'm in favor of more ruthlessly prioritizing single stack correctness.
Okay, I'm starting to remember, and I actually don't know that we fully made the change for an optimization necessarily. I think it was a correctness thing, and we had the sidecar change in development at the time, and we knew it fixed the problem. But it was seen as way too big and scary to backport, and it wasn't even done, and it is still big and scary. And so we kind of decided to go with that one, and they were kind of orthogonal. We thought both fixed the problem, and they both still made sense even after fixing the problem. Now that doesn't change. I mean, it does. Our original motivations don't necessarily matter that much because we know the output now, which was more efficient but incorrect. So yeah, I guess, like, in my mind, and it sounds like Keith, you're agreeing with this, is we should do the revert and do the unify sidecar scope. There is still an open question on 1.22. I think the answer is easy. We just revert because we made a major behavioral change in a patch release, which is not good. But on 1.23, what should we do? Like, if we could also just revert there, but it is a bit odd to have a behavioral change in a .0 and then change it in a .1. We could also do the unified scoping, but it's a pretty big change. We could potentially do, I don't know, do both and have a flag to opt in to the sidecar scoping 1.23 off by default. That way, users would get the wrong behavior in that they lose some IPs, which is the state that has been for a few Istio releases that's been broken. But they could maybe opt in early to the future fix. Maybe that would make most sense. I don't know. What are people's thoughts?
So John, on the 1.23.0 release, so if a user is running with this and we revert it, what's the impact there?
I mean, it depends. So there's basically two different issues. There's the original behavior, let's say back in like 1.21, so we're not confused by anything. The behavior is that you might, in some scenarios, put multiple VIPs and some of them are lost. That's been a bug in Istio for a while. So we attempted all these fixes and they caused different issues. Now, someone on 1.23 may have a config where that issue is resolved and they're not hitting the new bugs that are introduced. And so they would see 1.23.1 comes out, I have kind of a regression. It's a regression back to the older Istio behavior, but that may not necessarily matter to them.
Okay.
And
But
that
the
behavior is for 121 and 122, right?
1.21 has not had any changes around this. So I just use 121 as a reference of like, there's not been anything touching 1.21 at all for this matter. So it's just like, this has been a bug of dropping IPs for quite a while. Then the fix to the bug caused new bugs. So
Yeah. So 123 has been only out for 3 weeks. Is that right?
yeah.
Yeah. So probably I would imagine, I don't know if people would actually use it in prod. They might still be testing it.
I also agree. Yeah. John, I'm leaning maybe we will revert. I started getting the 1.23.1 yesterday, but if we want to revert this in 1.23, I think it might be better for us to just pull this change in 1.23.1 and not wait longer if people are okay with reverting.
Yeah, I think also it's easy for us to maintain the code because if we introduce this as an opt-in feature for 123, and then you have to fix bugs in both there and the master, so might as well do it right in master.
Oh, so you're saying don't even merge this off by default change.
Yeah, just keep it simple because we know there's an issue. So I do have a question for you. So in your proposal, you said that's the behavior we had with sidecar. I'm going to highlight here. So basically service have address A and then service also have address B.
Yeah.
Does this work with dual stack if user have sidecar resource?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, because I was just curious, why would we do it differently without the sidecar resource? So basically, we already know this path would work for dual stack also.
Yeah, actually, I guess what you just said actually kind of convinced me that maybe we don't even need to worry about this 1.23 merging of this change because
they
if
can use
people need
the
a workaround, they can just
Yeah.
use a sidecar. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So we have a good workaround for them. All right, that's good. No, I guess the other question is, because I don't fully understand the history, do we see any drawbacks with the proposed approach, and why didn't we use it in the first place with using two address together for one service?
Oh, this is not like something that was explicitly designed. This was more like code was written and it behaved in a way that was merged. Yeah, this code is a mess. And then there's like 4 layers of intertwined and interdependent behaviors that are really wonky. And
Okay, got it. Well, the good thing is we recommend the user to use sidecar resource in production anyway, so hopefully, they'd be good. And this probably would be pretty well tested if most users are using sidecar resource, which is what you are proposing. All right, is there anything else we want to discuss on this topic, or are we ready to move on?
One more question. I think it might be on people's mind, but do we need to reconsider on the criteria of merging such changes in the patch releases? Like it was a bit of a bigger change. So I just wanted, I know people probably have discussed this a few times in the past. But any do we need to reconsider or change anything, or if not, then that's fine as well. But curious.
Yeah, I think we made a mistake on this one at the very least. I mean, it was always a stretch to get into 1.22, but if we did it, then we really should have had a feature flag around it. And then the solution would be simple. We just change the default feature flag and tell users that haven't upgraded to change it as well. That's the whole point of feature flag, right? So yeah, I think it's a good call out. Like in retrospect, we definitely need that. And like, for example, my Unify sidecar scope here, there's no feature flag. I did that for a reason, and I've changed my mind, and I'm definitely going to add a feature flag for that now. So.
All right, so that's a great call out. I guess particularly for the release team and approvals, adding a feature flag for features so we don't have good confidence, and especially for new features. Keith?
Yeah, especially with compatibility versions and our newfound discipline when it comes to feature flagging, which I really appreciate, and I think users do as well. Do we think it makes sense to add something to our PR template to remind people to the same? We've got a bot for like adding tests. Maybe we should have something in the template for it says add new functionality. Do add a feature flag or compatibility version for it if it's a behavioral change.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Does anyone wants to take some action on that?
I can try making that change if someone can help guide me where that code base is.
Yeah, sure. It's feel free to ping me. It's in the .github folder of any of our repos, and yeah, John put the link there in the chat.
Sounds good.
Interestingly, Keith, one of the reasons why I was hesitant to add, and this is a bad reason, I'm just I was hesitant to add a feature flag, was that part of the nice part about the unified sidecar scope stuff is a big tech debt cleanup, because we had 2 split code paths, now we have 1, so we can remove the old one. Adding the feature flag and then putting it behind a compatibility version means that we could keep it around for longer. So just an interesting point. Like, I think it's a bad reason, and we shouldn't do that. But just being honest as a developer, what my mindset was. So it's good to call out when needed, like when we should have feature flag for anyone, even me, or it's good to keep ourselves honest. It's very easy as a person writing the change to skip the feature flag because it's easier. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. I mean, I think that it's as tiring as it might get, and even if you want to have a bias towards having feature flags, I think having a discussion of whether a feature flag is worth it is always going to be useful. And having that conversation in GitHub and kind of developing a community sense of when what's the right line for a feature flag is a good exercise. And so there are going to be cases where, to your point, the tech debt, keeping tech debt around might not be worth it. But there are cases where it might be. It's going to significantly make the change smoother for users. And just having that question, I think will hopefully help people, the developers, to have that dialogue back and forth. So I know for me, I don't think about it enough. So at the very least, we'll improve folks thinking about it.
Right. Are we okay to move on? Oh,
Yeah, so are we in agreement? So I guess for the 1.23 specifically, do we want to wait for 1.23.1 for, I can put up a revert PR. It's just a revert. We already did it in 1.22, so it shouldn't be too challenging. Does that make sense? I know you already put the build out, but I don't think we published it, right?
Samit, can you confirm that works with you?
Say that again. Say that again. Sorry, I was.
If I put out the revert for 1.23 today,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I can
yeah.
do, in a couple hours at most.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine. We'll get in 1.23.1.
Yes, yes.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks. Sorry, I know you already started some of the build.
It's okay.
All right. Thanks, John and Summit and everyone. Let's move on, Ben. Can you take us through this one?
Yeah, so this is something that was brought up where currently our Helm charts are not the way we do CR, like the way Helm does CRDs is sort of notoriously difficult, right? Helm does not do CRD upgrades because they contend there's no generic way to do it safely for them, which I think is true. More specifically for our charts, because we do sort of a mixture of recommendations on how to handle CRDs, the current state is that they are actually difficult to impossible to upgrade in any way, even like an in-place upgrade. So what I'm suggesting here is basically we just go all in on the method 2 that the Helm docs mentioned for CRD upgrades, which is where we move them out of the special CRD folder, just treat them like a regular old Kubernetes resource, like kubectl apply f crds.yaml, which can be a footgun generically in Kubernetes if you don't if you don't follow certain procedures to make sure your CRDs are upgradable and safely upgradable and stuff. But we do those things like I believe as a contract of we're never going to remove any CRDs, and our CRDs when they upgrade are always backwards compatible. Which is of course not something Helm can enforce that you do, but Istio can enforce that. Istio does that for Istio CRDs. Given that, I think we can just do it that way, which basically means in practice, the current enable CRD templates option that we have would become the default. Base would become the CRD chart, which it sort of already is. And we remove the resource policy keep stuff that leaves CRDs around after you uninstall the chart. Basically, that would just mean Helm would template the CRDs as any other resource. When you install base, you get the CRDs. When you upgrade base, you get the updated CRDs, and we ourselves are guaranteeing that they were compatible. And if you uninstall base, you delete the CRDs, which is equivalent to the two-step process we have in the docs today, where you uninstall base and then manually delete the CRDs. I think that's fine. And then there's some stuff to add the right labels to the CRDs so that they're properly managed. But basically, this is just making Helm ignore them as special things and treat them like any other resource. And then we basically take on ourselves the responsibility for managing the upgrades if there is such a thing to manage. Thoughts on this? Welcome. PR is there. I think this will probably be a little bit easier overall because it just basically means we're going to not treat them specially. Right. We already, our docs, basically, whenever we talk about removing Istio, we have delete base, then go and delete CRDs. That effectively becomes the same step. I don't know why you would ever want to delete the chart with the CRDs in it, but not delete the CRDs practically. So,
well, if theoretically, if you put the keep annotation and you run Helm install, it respects that and doesn't delete the CRDs. Is that true or false?
Yeah, today we have that keep annotation on all the CRDs. It respects that and won't delete them. Yes.
Yeah.
When you remove base.
In my mind, I'd rather keep that because if deleting CRDs will cause. It's more likely that it will cause issues than that it will solve problems. And so I'd much rather make it so that we leave them orphaned. And if someone doesn't like them, it's pretty easy to run a delete command. Rather than helpfully cleaning them up for the user.
We could. The only reason that I suggested that is that the base chart doesn't really have anything other than CRDs. So if you are uninstalling that, we can probably take that as an intent that you're removing the Istio CRD.
Yeah, you could, but there's a few reasons. One is users don't really know what they're doing most of the time. There's a few other things in base. Users might be confused about revisions. Istio Cuddle doesn't do it. We used to not do it. So I agree, like it does make sense what you're saying. I just worry that the benefit is, yeah.
It can be orthogonal, so I don't mind leaving that bit out. Okay, that's fair enough. And that means we'll keep it 2 steps, and then we'll do. Okay, so yeah, the decision keep for now. All right, but anyway, yeah, we don't have to have necessarily a decision now. Take a look at the PR. If anybody has any strong objection, or sorry, the issue, not the PR. If anybody has any strong objections to just basically going all in on the Helm method 2 here, and adding the label so that Helm can install an upgrade, and then always templating. If you have any objections to that, please open that issue and put the objections in. I don't think I doubt there will be any, and I can't think of any reasons why we shouldn't do this. But if there are, please do. That's it.
Which issue?
The 43204 right here, the one that you reopened.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a comment in there which details all this stuff. So if anyone objects to doing any of these 3 things, other than keep, which I think we said we could just leave out for now, so that leaves these 2. If you object to any of these 2 guys here, then you can put it in that PR. Yeah.
Just one question.
For that issue. Yes.
Just thinking of weird edge cases. So when you do CRDs the way we do in Helm, you can choose whether you include them or not with like the CRD flag. I forget what it's called. So obviously users can't set false now, which is fine, probably. I don't know why you would set false, but is there any concern of like Argo CD or something? They don't require CRDs to be in the CRD folder or something somehow, right? I can't imagine how. I just wanted to, if there's any.
That's, yeah, if anybody knows anything like that, throw it in the issue. I don't think like that, to me, that's like you're really getting into Helm's business at that point in a way that maybe means, I mean, Argo could still do that, but I think that they're just treating it like, they're treating it like Helm. If you're using it as a Helm chart, you shouldn't have any concern about that. And if you want it to just behave like a standard Kubernetes YAML, you also won't care that it's in a CRD folder, right? Because you're just templating stuff. So I struggle to imagine how you could do that, but there may be something. If someone knows something, throw it up there. We could also just change the default for a couple of releases and see if anybody else.
Yeah, the problem if you change the default, then you could end up with double CRDs, because if they're already setting like include the CRDs, and then now you also set enable the CRDs, then you get 2 CRDs, right?
Sorry, what do you mean there?
So, so there's enabled CRD templates. Yes. You're saying we set that to true, right?
Yes.
Now, if I just upgrade and I'm not paying attention or whatever, and I get doubled CRDs, right?
Yeah,
because I enabled the CRDs.
You're right.
So I feel like we should just do it and remove the CRDs from the CRD folder. That's probably the safest. By the way, I think there'll need some Istio Cuddle changes.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually, no, there won't. Well, no.
Maybe. We'll see.
I forget. If there is, I already made them in a different branch.
Okay.
So I can help you out.
Okay.
In the ambient only one, I had to switch to templating CRDs. So this will, 1, make that easier, and 2, help with that.
So I have a dumb question. So if I have a Istio CRD installed with a previous Istio, and then now I'm using in-place upgrade to update Istio to my new version, and I want the CRD to be refreshed, whatever is the latest from the new version, wouldn't the new version override the old one? I got confused when you said the duplicate version.
It would normally, but because we have CRDs in 2 different spots during the upgrade, if we kept the CRDs in both spots but changed the default, you might end up in a place where you try to get to. So that's something I can test, but we at least want to preclude that, right? We don't want to create it, because normally the way it should work is you do a Helm upgrade base and it will just replace your CRDs with the new ones. John was referring to, there may be an edge case where if we try to straddle the line here with the setting, we could have issues, which is why it might be better to just go ahead and switch it fully so that we don't have CRDs templated in 2 spots, but just in 1.
Okay, got it. By the way, with your proposal, I know John shared the concern about when user remove the base, would your proposal still keep the CRD or not?
Yeah, if we keep this tag here, then they'll be left, or at least that
You mean this tag?
the keep resource policy keep, which is already there. Yeah, so I was proposing we also remove
Okay,
that.
got it. Okay.
But if we leave that in place, then Helm should leave them when it removes, and that just means basically a quote unquote purge it remains a 2-step process. You have to uninstall base chart and manually delete the CRDs.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, because we support multiple revisions. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah, but
so
yeah,
thank you for connecting the dots. This is related to the removal. That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
okay.
Sounds like people are okay with this, except the second for the removal purpose. Is that true or not true?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, that's like the how I got to. Any objections? All right, I think we're good. I think that's what captured in the decision too. So I'm gonna do thumbs up here. Okay, we have 30 minutes back. On to your next topic, platform profiles.
All right, this is pretty straightforward. Take a look at the PR here. This is basically, if you've looked at our platform prerequisites page, for like ambient, also for sidecar, but let's just, and CNI, but let's just say ambient for now because it's easier. We have like K3D, K3S, Minikube, OpenShift. There's some certain sets of overrides that we document you have to do for like Istio CNI and a few other things. And we already have like an ambient profile and an ambient OpenShift profile. This is basically saying, let's have a separate things for platform and profile, and you just compose them, right? So you can say set profile ambient, set platform K3S, and you'll get ambient with the K3S overrides, ambient OpenShift, you get the ambient with the OpenShift overrides. This creates separate little files in the template folder, kind of like the compatibility versions, but for platforms. And the platform specific overrides always win. I think this is a little bit easier to reason about. It will simplify that docs page a bit, and it still gives us a reasonably decent way to do this in Helm. So you can always go see if you want to know what the overrides are for a platform, it's easy to go find them, but you don't have to set a bunch of flags in the command line and go look at that page and copy paste a bunch of crap. So hopefully that'll be easier to deal with. Yays or nays, leave your comments in the PR. And that should be it.
Yeah, thanks. I love this actually. Now that I'm thinking, this is great. I can specify platform for different ones because every time I have to do a copy paste because I can never remember the commands. So appreciate that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. The only issue I have is, does this mean we're removing the ambient OpenShift profile? I think yes. I think that's fine with me. It's very easy to tweak it. If we don't have an upgrade note, we should probably just put one on there. But otherwise, looks good to me.
Yeah, and the global thing, the reason I kept global is because it is already a global. I didn't add that; it's there, and it feels weird to change it. We can, and I don't think it would break anything. I think it makes sense to leave it as a global because it is something that would be true for a particular install across all charts. But we can deal with that separately. It doesn't. It is what it is already, and I'm not going to change it. So.
All right. Sounds good. Oh, look, we got the Red Hat team also weighing +1, so that's great.
Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like it's not global in the
It
CNI
is
chart.
global. I know it's global when it's referred to in the templates.
It does not work to set global on the CNI chart. Like that command.
That's true, but in some of the gateways where it's actually used for the OpenShift stuff, it actually is referred to as values.global.platform. In the template.
Today you have to set both or something.
They may be setting both, yeah. But where it's actually referenced directly in the templates, it is referenced as a global.
In one place it is in Istio D, but in it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I maybe we can defer if we want to do that as part of this. I can try to make it consistent, or we can just defer that a little bit because I don't think it. Yeah, I think it'll work either way with this particular proposal. But whatever you want to do, yep. Just comment in the PR.
Okay.
All right, very good. Anything else we should be discussing?
No, I also just saw Daniel Grimm from Red Hat commented that he was good on the PR, which is, since they're the current users of platform, I want to make sure they signed off, so that's good. So double thumbs up then.
All right. Awesome. All right, I think we had a great call. Thanks everybody for joining. Give you guys 8 minutes back. Thanks everyone. Bye.